It's now time for On the Line with Cheryl Wilkerson. The conversation will range from local dialogue to international. This show is meant to enlighten, inform, and to inspire. On the Line with Cheryl Wilkerson begins now.
Recently, Cheryl Wilkerson of the Fresh Start Morning Show held a roundtable discussion with gospel greats near and far. Today, you will hear part 2 of that discussion in anticipation of the upcoming PBS docuseries Gospel. Check out Gospel February 12th and 13th on WHRO Public TV here in Hampton Roads.
Minister Peggy, Britt, you know that song?
A little bit.
Tell us
a little
about that.
bit.
What do you know about that?
I arranged that so long ago, and I just wanted another generation to know the words to that song.
Yes.
Because the words are very, very powerful. Unfortunately, we've gotten used to people just dropping the beat and not paying attention to lyrics. But I'm a very lyric-driven writer, so I wanted people to know lift every voice and sing. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So today we're examining the relationship between Black spirituality and sermons. That's because Professor Lewis Henry Gates Jr. has written and produced a docuseries, Gospel. Don't miss the program. Again, it's February the 12th and the 13th, right here in Hampton Roads on WHRO Public TV. I have so many questions for you all. I called on one of the directors of the show. Her name is Stacy Holman, because I wanted to ask her, did she have to keep her emotions in check when she was creating this docuseries? And I just wanted her thoughts on what into it emotionally for her. And here's what she had to say.
2 songs we had with a choir. Other songs were a duet between Felice and Corey Henry, and another with Felice and Alexis. And just hearing, it's one thing to hear the recording, but to hear that gospel sound live was, I wanted to just sit and listen to it over and over and over again and just get lost in it.
Yeah, I asked that question because gospel music is powerful. It's moving. It can bring you from your deepest despair. So, Phil, as a music director, as a music executive, is that something that you keep front and center when you are thinking about whether or not to green light a gospel song?
It's challenging because I like to respect the songwriter, and some are more biblically sound than others.
Okay.
So, for example, I've worked with Donald Lawrence, and he's, very biblically sound in a lot of his lyrics and songs. And I've worked with Donnie McClurkin, very, also as well. But then some of my more younger artists on the roster may have a different interpretation. Doesn't make it bad. Mm-hmm. It's just I still like to make sure I'll send it to maybe a consultant to make sure that just, hey, is this in line with the word? Or even I've utilized my own pastor. When I did a gospel album with Snoop Dogg a few years ago, and even that was one that I was excited about the opportunity because it was a bridge project to me, but I also wanted to make sure that everything was in line the way it needed to be.
That's right.
Now, my Bishop Walker, Joseph Walker, I tell you, I've called him many times to say, hey, Bishop, can you put your ears on this? I'm going to send you a lyric sheet. Can you just make sure, and there's others in my circle that I've also leaned on just to make sure, because it's important what we're putting out into the world as record labels. We can't just, it's a great responsibility, and I take it very seriously. So.
Wow. Listen, can I just interject this, please? I have the utmost respect for you in your position, sir, because not only are you an executive, but you are a believer. Correct. You are a member of a church who pays attention to their pastor. Mm-hmm. And with all of that being a part of your consciousness as you're having to make those kinds of decisions cannot be easy. So, sir, my hat's off to you.
Thank you, Pastor Britt. That means a lot coming from you, someone who I'm from Virginia as well. I followed your career. And Missy and I have talked about you a number of times as well. So, Thank you. That means a lot coming from you.
Absolutely.
I touched on this next question a little bit earlier, but I want to kind of dig into it. I've heard the elders say that the sermons and the songs of old are based on Scripture, whereas the contemporary songs of today are based on feelings. So if that's true, is one way right and the other way wrong? Or are they both right? Are they both wrong? Or who wants to put their foot into that one?
Again, I'll just say, if you will, the it depends on what house or where you are, in my humble opinion. Again, for example, we go through a lot of anthems here at Norfolk State University with our choir. We sing high feast anthems, things that they would sing when the king or queen is being crowned and so forth. But then that same text can go then from there to a wonderful setting of a motet during the Baroque period, but then transitioning on now to then using that same type of harmonization with an opening to a gospel selection that maybe Richard Smallwood might have arranged with a classical background. Then they can accept it that way because Mr. Smallwood has a huge classical background. So again, I think
but those are music students.
Right.
What about the world?
Then it would depend on the house and the upbringing from home all the way to the church.
The line there, it is not. I don't think it's necessarily a right or wrong line, because, oh man, I'm gonna get in trouble for this. If you are a believer and you have a personal relationship, and you yourself are in your word, guess what the word does? The word makes you feel.
Okay, I'm with you.
A kind of way.
I can get that.
You
Okay.
understand?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the Psalms are so wonderful to study and to meditate on, because David will take you from the depths of despair to the mountain of victory and celebration. And so when you have a scriptural base, and I'm glad you mentioned Donald Lawrence, because I just love him.
So many people do.
And his approach. When you have a scriptural base, and then you're able to wrap a great song around that scriptural base because you've been gifted to do so, then it's going to make you feel a kind of way. Okay. And whether that's a way of repentance or a way of joy, whatever that is, it's going to stir up some kind of emotion. And that's what the whole industry, the recording industry does. It gives us the soundtrack of how we're feeling.
Is that what you do, Phil?
That's the goal. Every day I walk into the office, it's the goal, and it's not an easy goal to achieve. Again, working with people like Donald and Pastor McClurkin and Fred Hammond and so many, and Kirk Franklin, like they have a certain grasp. And some of my young artists, like Corinne Hawthorne, who I signed, she had a song called "Won't He Do It." Although we didn't have a scriptural base for the song, she's still saying Jesus in the song. She's not being ambiguous like some songs we heard, he and him. Like, she was very bold in her approach, but it was her interpretation and how she, as at the time, 18-year-old, communicates with God and just what he brought her through. So I can appreciate both. I don't think, to Pastor Britt's point, I don't think it's a right or wrong, but it's about the approach and it's about the feeling. But I'm in support of both when it's coming from that right place, though.
When Dr. Thornton talked about the streaming part,
yes,
I remember one time, maybe especially during the COVID, coming out of COVID, whenever COVID was, whatever COVID was, Jonathan McReynolds would do an Instagram live, and he would do it like once every week, and it would be a bunch of persons that would get up there, and he would ask for the listeners there to just give me a word that I can write a song off, and they would just give him the weirdest words. But some of them, and some of those persons there, if I may say, maybe a young lady or two were interested in Jonathan, but they would give him a word, and then he would turn that word into a song via the scripture, and it was amazing. So then
it's
he would then
like
write from
do.
exactly
Okay,
right.
right.
So, but he was using the audience to help him. What is it that you all like? And then once if the word comes and they like it, then he would just immediately do a melody, create from that word, turn it into something scriptural based, and then everybody on the stream loved it. Said, "Would you all buy this?" Yes, and then he went on forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. Go ahead.
Did something come from that?
I don't recall.
okay.
I don't recall, but I'm sure he stays in tune with a lot of his audience. I know a lot with Instagram at times, and he asks for those kinds of things, a statement, give me a sentence, and he just writes something off of that right there in front of you. And I thought that was brilliant.
Have you ever done that, Pastor Britt?
Yeah, I did it at a at a function that I served for a women's function, and somebody said something, and as a songwriter, whenever it hits you, and you got to get a piece of paper, you got to get your phone, you got to do something because you got to catch it. I think I got a whole lot of hits in the trash can because I didn't write it down. But yeah, absolutely. When you've been gifted to write songs, almost anything that comes your way, you can tune it up.
I am so amazed by that. Another producer of the show, Shayla Harris, spoke to me about whether things went as planned when making gospel, or did they have to pivot at any time to bring the whole project to television?
We came up with some creative solutions to immerse the audience in those moments with these live performances by a choir and by these incredible artists and musicians. And so we really hope that people will really feel the difference and feel that immersion in the experience.
And so here's a question that it's a simple question, and we kind of talked on it. We kind of talked or danced around it before, but it's something to think about. Every time one hears a gospel song or hears a gospel sermon, should you always feel something? Should something come from you? The scripture says his word should never return void. In other words, his word will ultimately accomplish whatever he intends it to. But as human beings, do we really believe and feel that with every song and every sermon that it will move us? Because I have to tell y'all, I went to church Sunday, and the church is looking for a pastor. And so they had a pastor up there, and I was very excited about the pastor when I saw his credentials. Mm-hmm. But when I walked out, I was kind of flat.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot that goes into that, and it's not always you. It's not always them. It's something that is rather ethereal and more, I think, spiritual and or emotionally based. Because sometimes you'll get something, and sometimes you'll get something new. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you won't get something new, but you'll get a reminder of something that you already know. Mm-hmm. And I think the way that our society is so hooked on instant gratification, yes, that sometimes we look to come out of the church jumping across pews every Sunday. It's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to. But it doesn't mean that you didn't get anything, because sometimes what you get is down the road. It's in you. Mm-hmm. That's why it's so important to sit under the word so that it can get in you. Is it going to work tomorrow? Maybe not. But what about 4 months down the road when somebody cuts you off in traffic? Maybe it'll work that day.
Maybe it'll work that day. Has that ever happened to you, Phil, where you left and you're glad you went, you had a fine time, but it wasn't what you expected?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all been there. I mean, and I'm completely fine with it, because I don't expect every Sunday has to be this big event. Sometimes it may be just a message that impacts me a bit differently than what because of what I'm going through in that chapter of my life. So, sometimes, I went to Bill Winston's church in Chicago, or Tony Evans in Texas, and it's more about the word. And again, there's a musical component as well, but sometimes I really just want the word. And again, nothing against the music, because it's a part of the overall experience. Right. But sometimes it's okay. So when, and sometimes it's a song that cuts through in a different kind of way, because again, what I'm going through, or what I'm, have gone through or about to go through, it's just like, so it really just depends. But yeah, I don't expect, that's not fair to me. That's also not fair to the church and the team there. It's not every Sunday you're going to leave on this, that's right, this euphoria, this high, like every single Sunday. That's not fair to everybody.
Yeah, that's what I meant. It's just not going to be that way every Sunday. Sometimes you can leave and you'll be crying and you'll be crying all the way home in the car because it just has had that kind of impact. But who's not to wait a minute? Who's not to say that impact that you had at that moment is the result of those smaller impacts that you weren't even aware of that have piled up into that cry? You understand what I'm saying?
And sometimes that cry is a happy cry. Everybody assumes it's a sad cry.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes it's a joyful cry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. Mm-hmm.
I talked to Stacey Holman. Again, she's a director and producer of Gospel, which is coming up February 12th and 13th. Everybody needs to check it out on WHRO. And I asked her what specific stories she wanted to share within this series.
Not really the lesser-known stories that people don't really know or people don't really aren't aware of, and specifically stories of women.
Stories of women. So let's talk about that, okay? How important have black women been in the church? In the Bible, you got Sarah, you got Rachel, you got Hagar. The list goes on and on. But have you looked at black women as pillars of black spirituality?
You asking me?
Yes, ma'am. I am.
Are you kidding me? Absolutely. Absolutely. We have been the backbone and in the background, but not so much in supporting what our hardworking men do. And not only that, but some of the things that we even do on our own to add to the uplifting of our culture is, I'm glad that Stacey, I hope she doesn't mind me calling her by her first name, is uncovering that, so to speak, because I think that is some of the forgotten part of our history that should be exposed so that other people of this generation and beyond can begin to have the confidence to know that we are world changers. No matter how you cut it, we're world changers.
Phil, how does that work within the industry of being a record executive? Is it men gospel heavy, or is it women gospel heavy, or is there a balance of the both?
I think that varies from, roster to roster. I've been very intentional in every label I've been at this point. This is the third one at this point, but at each company, I'm very intentional about to make sure we have gender balance. Like, that's, to me, it would be egregious just to have it an all male roster. But I've worked with Shirley Caesar. I've worked with Erica Campbell. When I was at Sony, I had at the same time on the roster Leandria Johnson, Corinne Hawthorne, Doe, Kiara Sheard. But, in the company before that, I had Karen and Brenda and Shirley and Erica all on the same roster. Now we have Tasha Cobbs-Leonard and Evie McKinney and, a few new signings that are not as well known. But, again, we have to be intentional. So, it can be male-dominated in some ways. But, again, the women are the cornerstone of gospel music and of this country and this world, for that matter. So it has to be reflective in gospel music to me. And that's not only the artist side, but also behind the scenes. Like, whether you're a writer, like I have a number of, songwriters that are women that I work with on a consistent basis, engineers. Like, it's not just, to me, just one specific area. We have to be intentional. And then I must acknowledge that one of my favorite executives who really blazed the trails in gospel music 30 plus years ago is a woman named Vicki Maglation, who founded Gospel Centric, which is why we know Kirk Franklin and Donnie McClurkin and Byron Cage and so many others. But that is a woman, but more specifically a black woman who had a vision and really set out a plan and made significant strides. And it's one of the main reasons I'm sitting here on this phone talking with you today, because she laid the groundwork.
I thank you for mentioning her. I had the great privilege of meeting her at a function that we had here a few months ago for the Gospel Music Alliance. It wasn't like a convention, but it was a gathering. I don't know.
A gathering.
Yeah. And I had the opportunity to meet her, and I love her and Claude, and definitely what she did as a female, as a black female, for gospel music, it was unprecedented. And I haven't, seen it done since. I don't know, maybe there's some others that are behind the scenes, but definitely Vicki is a favorite of mine because she kind of dug it out.
Wonderful.
She did. And with a staff of mostly black women as well, Pastor Britt. That was the other thing that was special about Gospel Centric. A lot of not all, but the majority of the staff was all young, powerful black women that are still around in the industry to this day, but kudos to Vicki Maglatiot.
Exactly, yeah.
So this PBS special, it's entitled Gospel. If you're just joining us, it's dynamic, it's moving, it's powerful. What should the legacy of the show be? Director Shayla Harris had this to say.
An appreciation for this extremely unique African-American art form that isn't just church music, but really inspired a freedom movement, has inspired pop culture, and really coalesces how the African-American community has infused faith and hope into their journey.
And just quickly, I want to slide in here, Minister Earl Bynum. He had some thoughts on legacy, and I want you all to hear what he had to say.
The foundation of how it all started. And I think we have to look at that by going as far back as the late Thomas Dorsey. And then we went from Thomas Dorsey starting his convention and starting with the Precious Lord and the passing of his wife and writing that song. But then we have to include also the late, great James Cleveland, who started the Gospel Music Workshop of America. But then we can go over to the Church of God in Christ with the Clark sisters' mother, Dr. Mittie Moss Clark. So it's so many facets.
So many facets that we should think about when we are talking about legacy. And, I would like to hear from you, Pastor Britt.
Mm-hmm.
What should the legacy of gospel music be?
I think it's so funny you mentioned legacy because the other ministry that I have, that is financial services, talks about the same thing, about legacy. What does that mean? That means that for the next few generations, or for the next generations, not even few, but for the next generations, there is a remembrance of what it has taken to get us where we are, and there is a passion for keeping that memory alive so as not to lose what it has imparted to who we have become. That's very, very important. Financially, that's important for legacy. We don't talk about it a lot in our community, but I hope that we start. But musically, definitely, because this is something that has been inherent. I was talking to a guy who's producing a track for me now yesterday, and he was talking about we were saying something along those lines, and what we were saying was the things that we were as a people born with, we have kind of taken for granted, and we have watched other ethnicities, no disrespect to them, but to come in and to master what was natural for us. And so legacy, in my view, is very important that people understand where that came from, that it came from us first.
We have to acknowledge that. Phil, in your line of work, what is the legacy of gospel music?
Just continue to create an avenue and an outlet to share the gospel on a global level. Like that, to me, personally, as well as professionally, is extremely important because, as it was previously mentioned, gospel is the foundation for every genre. Let's start there. So whether you jazz, blues, country, rock and roll, R&B, hip hop, whatever, it all started with gospel. And that's something that I constantly remind my peers and our corporate partners. So just making sure that we continue to properly resource, support, and just create a global platform for this music that is not, it's gospel music, but it's American music, it's global music, and it's something that's super necessary to inspire the world and continue to provide hope. So that's my desire. And from a label side, it's imperative. We have to just keep it going and keep it resourced and keep supporting, keep streaming, keep downloading, whatever. If you still buy physical CDs where you can find them, whatever we can do to continue to support, because it's important that gospel lives on, because it has, and it is the foundation for all forms of music, and it's just important that we continue to keep it alive.
I am so grateful, sir, that you are sitting in the seat that you're sitting in with the mindset that you have. I can't tell you. I hope to.
What you expect? He's from Norfolk.
Hey, that's what I'm talking about. But I just, man, listen.
And Pastor Britt, I'm friends with your son Boo as well. We go back from when I was a teenager. He could tell you about me. So
get out of here.
Yeah,
absolutely. That, of course, you know that's my guy. But
yes, smile on her face is just as big as it can be. Yes.
But to have you to feel that way and to sit in the seat that you're sitting is going to make a huge difference in our legacy, because people that sit where you sit are able to facilitate the fact that we will have legacy and that we will have the remembrance of what has happened, so that we cannot let it go and keep that passion going. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
Phil is something else. Like I said, he started here in Norfolk, and just to see him and his travels and where he's been and the lives he's touched, it is wonderful, just as yourself. I'm old school.
Yeah.
I like the old school way of things.
Mm-hmm.
And to see you all standing strong and, like you say, doing the right thing, that means a lot. You are in position. We are grateful that you are in position, because you know a lot of the history. You're still doing your thing. Mm-hmm. You're telling the history. You're setting folks straight when they're not quite on point with the history. So we appreciate all of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have had a great discussion today leading up to this dynamic docuseries. I don't know how many times I can say it, but I'm going to say it again. It's entitled Gospel. It's going to be on WHRO Public Television, February 13th. 12th and the 13th, I should say. Mm-hmm. It is produced, it's written, it's hosted by Professor Henry Louis Gates Jr. I want to thank Minister and Pastor Peggy Britt for being a part of this panel.
Man, this has really got my day off to a great start. To even be asked, I was humbled, but to be able to share my passion for this genre, for the people that listen. And for my co-panelists,
yes,
who have come alongside to share this, it's been a blessing. Thank you so much for having me.
It has. Mr. Executive, Mr. Senior Vice President of Capitol Records and Norfolk State alumnus, Mr. Phil Thornton.
And so am I.
Thank you very much for joining this panel this morning.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to, my Hot 91 Norfolk State fam. It's always, I'm here. So I'm grateful to have this conversation and share this space and time with my co-panelists. But thank you. And I can't wait to see the docuseries. I'm really excited. I've been seeing some of the previews and hearing it, you all talking it up. So I can't wait to check it out.
Absolutely.
That's it. And for Mr. Terry Butler joining us here today in the studio, we thank him. On behalf of WNSB, our general manager, Mr. Maynard Scales, and the entire, when I say entire staff, I mean the entire staff, we want to thank all of the panelists and everyone who worked on this wonderful discussion. My name is Cheryl Wilkerson. This is WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA.